Our Urban Affairs Committee considered 4 general areas: an organizational response to state problems. In an effort to answer the need for some response from the state to the cities, we will recommend the creation of a department or office of urban affairs devoted specifically and entirely to the solutions of problems of the cities. We deal with transportation, with housing, with the development of rural communities, as the in-migration from rural to urban affects the intensity of problems which attend urban life.
The maze of underpasses and overpasses here in Fort Worth, located on the eastern edge of the downtown section, known locally as the Mixmaster, has nightmarish qualities about it to many truck drivers as well as many automobile drivers. In the past few years, there have been dozens of trucks overturned on slippery streets. Today was no exception. About 1:30 in the early morning hours, this truck turned over on its side. The truck was en route from Hereford, Texas to Newark, New Jersey, with a load of some 202 sides of beef. Each one of the beeves weighed from 175 to 200 pounds. It took 6 workmen working from 5 o'clock this morning until about 11:30 or 11:35 to unload the truck. The driver, fortunately, was not injured too seriously. He had a few broken ribs and had a hole in his head, but he's going to be all right. He is much more fortunate than many truck drivers in the past. It's been one of those days. We've had a lot of accidents in the Fort Worth area, which just reminds us that when you're driving on rain, slippery streets, for goodness sakes, take it easy, and be sure to take it easy when you're in the Mixmaster in downtown Fort Worth. Art Sinclair, Channel 8 News on the Move, Fort Worth. Things began to gin today in the state capitol building, only the second day of the session. For one thing, the first major disagreement erupted in the Senate. Senator Chet Brooks of Pasadena said that he is going to resign from the Education Committee. He blasted Lieutenant Governor Ben Barnes, saying that he, Brooks, should have been appointed chairman of the Education Committee instead of Senator Oscar Mauzy of Dallas. He said he has 4 more years seniority than Mauzy. Mauzy and Barnes both said they're sorry that Brooks felt that way because they felt he could have added some to the Education Committee. Senator Mike McKool of Dallas introduced a constitutional amendment to be voted on in 1972. If it is approved, it would create annual sessions of the Texas legislature. I asked McKool why he thinks annual sessions are so important.
This way, they're able to better tell what their income and their expenses will be, and if Texas has it, it will enable the legislators to better legislate and to better represent Texas.
A revolutionary new concept in grocery consumer buying is being put into operation starting tomorrow at all Buddy supermarkets in Tarrant County. It's called Compar-N-Save, and it marks a first not only for Tarrant County and the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but for the entire Southwest. This morning, Buddy's spokesman Jerry Brownlee explained how Compar-N-Save will operate.
The system shows the price per measure as well as the price of the item. That is to say, on a can of fruit cocktail such as this one, it will show, as it always has, that this can costs 28 cents. But in addition, it will show that the can costs 1.9 cents per ounce. This then allows a housewife to compare this can of fruit cocktail with this can, which costs a penny more for the can, but less per ounce.
This Buddy's store in Everman has been a test site for Compar-N-Save. We followed Mrs. Sue Vineyard on her shopping tour. Then I asked her reaction to this concept.
Well, I think it's very, very convenient for shoppers. Previously, I've had to figure my own unit prices, and I'm not a mathematician. Most of the shoppers in the store probably are not. So it's very convenient for all of us, I'm sure.
Do you think it's going to save you time as well as money?
Certainly. It takes a great deal of time for me to figure each item because as I say, I'm not a mathematician.
There have been several bills introduced into Congress which would make it compulsory for stores to mark goods with the cost per measure. So far, none have been enacted into law. Consumer advocates such as Virginia Nauer and Bess Meyerson have long pushed for a system such as Compar-N-Save. It's too early to determine what effect this will have on the grocery savings in Tarrant County, but at least the housewife can judge for herself now without having to carry an adding machine along. Jerry Park, Channel 8 News on the Move, Everman.
Problems arose when individual engineers acting as project managers began designing outside the limits of the overall criterion budget and without authority. As the problems arose, we repeatedly called them to the attention of Dr. Estes and the two men he put in charge of implementing the program, Dr. Weldon Wells, Deputy Assistant Superintendent in charge of operations, and F. Paul Arnold, District Engineer. When it became apparent that nothing was being done by the owner, the Dallas Independent School District, to correct the situation, we had no professional alternative other than to resign.
Yesterday, Mr. Herman Blum said that he thought that one of the problems was that there was not enough decisive action by the DISD as to whether or not they were going to hold to the $41.2 million budget. Has that action been taken now?
Well, I think it's well agreed by our advisory committee, and as I understood Dr. Berkeley today in the school board meeting, they also agree that this job must be done within the $41.2 million, and it has to be tailored to meet that budget. I don't think there's any question about it. I just believe it has to be done for that. Now, some things may have to be eliminated. I don't mean schools, but I mean certain refinements may have to be eliminated to meet it, but they're just going to have to be done that way. At least I think they should be done, and I believe Dr. Estes and the board feels the same way.
When we started, the hearts would stay alive about 1 or 2 days at best. And as we learned more about what the requirements were, the period of survival increased considerably, and now they live about 2 to 4 weeks, sometimes as long as 5 weeks.
Now, taking, for example, the hearts that we have here, under the microscope, I understand that is about the only way you can watch them operate.
That's right. They're awfully small. As you can see, they're just about 1/25th of an inch in diameter, and you can just barely see them with the naked eye.
Now, where did you, well, I'm not sure how I want to put this, Doctor. How did you come up with this theory or this method of keeping them alive?
Well, especially with the recent interest in cardiac transplantation and with cardiac surgery, it's been important to find out how to preserve hearts artificially.
Can you foresee, at least in your term as a doctor, transplant banks or organic banks?
The major problem with transplantation right now is an immunological problem. I think once that problem is solved, the problem of preserving hearts and that sort of thing in banks can be solved fairly readily.
In other words, you're talking about the rejection problem.
That's right, yes.
Colonel,
If you continue to have bad luck in finding the aircraft, how long will the search go on?
Well, this varies with the type of aircraft you're looking for, the circumstances the aircraft went down under. A general rule of thumb is the search would be conducted for 10 days.
And then discontinued?
And then discontinued, except for any possible new leads that would be checked out.
After 2 meetings of the committee, we decided that perhaps we could be of most service by appointing a small subcommittee to go over with the administration and the engineers and the contractors some of the criteria that they've been using to see if it met what our original report intended. And we believe now that the problem in the past has been the fact that the Consulting Engineers Council set up certain design criteria, whereas we think that the way to do it is to set up performance criteria.
If the constitutional amendment, which I introduced, is approved, it means that in Texas we will have annual legislative sessions. That is, the legislature would meet each year to set its budget principally, and this way it would have only a year's income and a year's expense to try to look ahead to. And it would mean a great deal to the people of Texas if it...
In what way?
Well, I know of no business that operates on any 2-year budget, income and expenses. Texas legislative work is the biggest business of all, and certainly it is absurd to think that we can set a budget for 2 years in advance to look into the future and try to determine what the expenses and income will be.
was another fruitless day of searching for that missing F-111. The search has been centered in a mountainous forest about 20 miles northeast of Clarksville, Arkansas. Ground crews checked out an area that looked promising, but found nothing. The Air Force thought it had a lead from an aerial photograph that seemed to show the fuselage of the missing plane. Air Force Colonel Norris R. Swindle is directing the search operations in this area. Colonel Swindle, what did the men find?
No trace of the missing aircraft. They've searched the suspected areas that we've had and have turned up nothing.
If the weather continues to be this bad, when will the search continue?
The search will probably continue in the morning again, on foot, and hoping for a break in the weather to where we can utilize Air Force helicopters out of Little Rock Air Force Base.
Do you have any forecast that would indicate that you would be able to use the helicopters?
Right now, the weather people can't give us any hope on anything better than what we've got today through.
One of the mysteries of the whole affair is that there's been no signal from the emergency beacon on board the aircraft. It's beginning to become a question of whether the plane will ever be found. Jay Lewis, Channel 8 News on the Move in the Ozark National Forest.